Is that putting me? There we go.
Yep.
I am going to. Oh, we're already recording. We've been recording the entire time you've been here. No video, but audio has been definitely getting recorded. So later, I will take donations for what you want me to cut out of the audio. All right. So when we do wood turning, we take the wood. So there's logs out behind my. It seems like what I really do is I move wood. Okay? I have probably 7 or 8 complete trees back there that I've gone and I've developed ways to pick big, heavy trees up. It's an obsession, actually. And so in that time, I've learned how to weld. I've learned how to, well, there's a lot of things I've learned how to do that promote this. But anyway. So then you got to get a bandsaw and you cut them down into, first you use a chainsaw, you cut it into smaller pieces, and then you take the bandsaw and you turn it into squares. If you're going to do, like those are bowl blanks that are over there, but squares like this. These are all potential snowmen that are over here. And I'll look through, not all of these pieces of wood are going to end up as a snowman because they're probably not going to survive the process of becoming a snowman, but I just throw them in there real quickly, and then as I'm putting them on the lathe, I decide what the deal is. Okay, all right. So pretty much anything that's done on a lathe is round. You say that, but there are actually ways to make things not round. But we're going to start with this guy, and we're going to turn him from square corners to round. Okay. There we go. Okay. So what I tell people is okay, you're going to start out, you're going to put this on there, you're going to put it on the tool rest, and you're going to slowly bring it up, and you can see it starting to cut. And we do this. Okay? And just to kind of show you what that looks like, I'm very, very slowly, I'm just taking the corners off, right? Now, when I do this in the shop, I have a safety center that's driving this, and it's a neat addition to the wood turning, because if I stick this into the wood too hard like that, I can stop it, but it doesn't fly off the lathe, it doesn't break it. And doesn't cause problems, and so I like that, especially when I'm teaching. But anyway, it means I can't be quite as aggressive as I'd like to be. What I'm feeling for is are there any flats that are left on the wood, right? So any of those, what was square, and I think over here there's still some flat. So let's see if we can see it. Yeah, you can see one right there, kind of, right there. But I can feel that when I'm turning. That's good enough for the first stage. Then I'm going to use, it's called a spindle roughing gouge. That's about the only thing you use it for, is to take a piece of wood that's in this orientation and turn it around. If you do that with a bowl blank, you're going to get into trouble. And if anybody decides that they want to learn more about this, I'd be happy to teach you, and I'll teach you why that's important. But for today, we're just going to make a snowman. So the first thing we got to do is we got to look at this and say, what doesn't look like a snowman, and let's get rid of it. And I'm going to have the hat down here, the top of the hat, and then the body, and we'll get down. I make 2 different kinds of snowmen, and then depending upon the type of wood and whether I make it as a 2-piece or a 1-piece, depends on what the price is. They sell for $35, $40, and $45, and I will sell every single one of them this year that I make. Like I said, I have 1,300 people that follow me, and 98% of the sales that I have are to women, which I'm sure doesn't surprise any of you. Men look at it and go, I could do that. So that kind of looks like a top hat, right? Putting my example guy down here. And I know 2 of these are the same, but you know, huh? Oh, okay. And so where are we at? We're trying to figure out by this where this guy would be a $40 one because he's got special wood. Also known as this wood was starting to rot and it got pretty colors in it, spalting and things of that nature, but people like that. Okay, so somewhere in there we got to make a band, and then we got to make it dark. So I kind of like taller hats. So from here, the hardest part of making a snowman is what comes up next. And it's because it's kind of tight. So I switched tools to something that's a little smaller. And what I got to do is I got to figure out how can I make this look like it's sitting on top of his head and not like too far on top of his head. By the way, if you do take this hobby up, you're always going to be covered in this. No joke, I get to work in the morning, right? I'm an IT guy for Philips. I'll get to work in the morning. I've showered twice by the time I get to work because one before I went to bed, and then when I get up in the morning, and I'll do something like this, and I'll reach up and there's a chip in my ear. So anyway. Huh?
Better than on your shoulder.
Yeah, I suppose. What I found out a long time ago with snowmen is they don't have to be perfect snowmen. As a matter of fact, none of these really look exactly like a snowman because if you're going out and you're making a snowman as a kid, which by the way, I grew up in a place where there was enough snow that you could make snowmen. You know, I mean, they're relatively round and everything else. The thing is with wood turned items, you end up getting paid for size. Okay, and so you think, well, gee, a snowman this tall is worth more than a snowman this tall. It's about the same amount of effort, but the problem with a snowman this tall and then the balls as big as they would need to be is that they're going to crack as they dry, okay? And if you don't do that, you have to glue it up and everything else, then you've got a lot more time and a lot more effort, and now I can't sell it for $35 to make it reasonable. It would be $135. Well, so one day I was making them, and they were like this tall, and I was making them, and I'm like, and I had just a little extra wood. I'm like, well, I'm just going to include that, you know, in the shape. And then it developed into basically this, because this gives you something that you guys, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to sell you guys stuff, but if you want to buy stuff, I have to. It's big enough you can put on a shelf, right? And you can see it. So that's something that makes it worthwhile. Okay. So you got to get up under the hat, and then you got to shape the head, and I can go back to a bigger tool, so that controlling what the hat looks like on the head has to do with the shape of the ball down here and this. I know that makes sense to you all, but I'm not very artistic. My daughter is extremely artistic, and she'd probably be able to explain to you why. But after I've made a couple, probably over 1,000 of these things, you learn kind of what looks good and what doesn't. The next ball needs to be a little less than the final diameter of the biggest ball on the bottom. The good news about this is kids make snowmen, right, in real life. And so if your snowman isn't perfect, all the better, right? Because kids wouldn't make something that's perfect. And hang on. My alarm system is telling me that people are in the barn.
Now?
It's been telling me, and I just keep telling it to shut up. Okay. So, not perfect, right? My goal here is to get it close. I don't want to spend an enormous amount of time sanding, but at the same time, there we go. Back to that. It's probably easier to see. But I'm not worried about like this line right here. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but there's a line there that I can see. There's a couple of lines up in here, but those will sand out, mainly because this is side grain and not end grain. But anyway, and so then it's just from there. I think it's funny, by the way, the way the lathe is made, this thing is to lock this tailstock in place. And as this turns and things seed in more and more, it gets looser in there. And if you have this locked down, you reach up here and you feel this, and it's like, oh, it's nice and secure. And then before you know it, it gets looser and looser and looser. And the next thing you know, you wish you had on a catcher's mask as that thing flies off. I have been hit by a couple of pieces, but most of the time they hit me in here. Usually they go down or up. Occasionally they'll go that way, but most of the time these things are oriented this way. It's not going to happen, I promise. So it can be dangerous, but the reality is this is the cutting thing, right? That thing's by far more dangerous than this, right? I'm not going to lose, probably. I'm not going to lose a finger. Well, there's some things you can do, right? You don't stick your fingers in between. But anyway, I'm not going to lose a finger by doing this. And if I'm wearing eye protection, and if you're doing a lot of sanding, breathing protection, and things of that nature, it's probably one of the safest woodworking things that you can do, in my opinion. But anyway, and then from here it's just kind of a, what is your shape? What do you like? These don't take all that much time to do, this part anyway. But of course there's the gathering of the wood, the cutting of the wood, the painting the faces on, the putting the arms in, making the noses and things like that. But this seems to set them apart a little bit too when you put and this just happens to be whatever this stuff is. But I don't care about what piece of wood I'm holding on it. What I care about is the friction. And so I just need a piece of wood that's about the thickness of the hat band. And that works great, right? And now I've got a nice dark band on it. When it looks very solid right now, but I bet you when I slow this down, it's not solid. And I actually like the imperfections. Well, this one's pretty solid. Most of the time, they're not. That one is too. All right, I'm a liar. They're always really, really solid. But anyway, so that's pretty much it as far as forming the snowman. I'm constantly losing my tools. You also hear, if you ever watch professional demonstrations of this, they all say, oh, you never move the tool rest, which is this thing I'm moving, while the lathe is on. And then you watch them long enough and they all do it. That's because we all do it. What's interesting to me is I know the best, the most famous, if you will, wood turners in the world. Most of them know me by name. Because there's only so long you can do this where people don't get to know you. And to put this into contrast as far as a hobby goes, quilting, pretty popular. There's a show down in Houston that isn't the biggest quilting show in the world, and I heard a statistic that over 300,000 visitors showed up to that quilting show, which went on for a week. I, on the other hand, go to the biggest wood turning show in the world, and it may have 2,500 people that show up at it. But anyway, I know people who make a living doing this. I'm actually teaching. Well, I no longer need to teach him, but I helped teach a kid down in Tulsa. He's now probably 20, and he is embarking, he's decided that this is what he wants to do for a living. I asked him if he wanted to be poor, and he said, well, he didn't really have any responsibilities yet, and he thought he could do it. And so the other day when I was down getting wood in Tulsa for the from that storm, he and I grabbed several logs and we dumped them off at his place. And then the next week he made 130 bowls. I made 6. So anyway, that's pretty much it on how you turn a snowman. But wait, we're missing, oh, hang on. So we're missing a nose, right? So we got to make a nose. But, okay, hang on. This one you won't be able to see unless we're, so this is a very simple shape, right? It's just going to be a little cone. It's got to be smaller than you'd think to look right. And I'm missing. Well, that's true. I do spend an enormous amount of time just looking for tools, and just like, and so it's like reading glasses, right? Right? You got it. You think to yourself, I either need one of these, and only one, so that I have to always have it, or I need so many that when I turn around, it's there. With reading glasses, I go with the other. I have probably 20 pairs of reading glasses. This wood is not terribly structurally sound. One of the things you have to do is you have to get good at sharpening. If you do this.
Here we go, Robert.
I saw a sharpener back there.
Huh?
I saw your sharpener back there.
Did you?
I'm sharpening solutions.
Okay. Yeah, you really can't. I mean, it's not. Probably you couldn't afford it, but also you just don't have time, right? I couldn't. I'm sure if I took my tools to you, they would be they'd be razor sharp, right? When I was done, when you were done with them, and that'd be great for about 5 minutes, and then they would be dull. And I need to, and then I'd have to take them to you again. And so that's that. You saw how hard that was. That was really difficult. But so when I make noses, and I haven't started making noses yet this year. When I make noses, yeah, I did that on purpose. I wanted you to see me mess up. When you start making noses, I'll make 50 or 100 of them in an hour or so, and you kind of get into a rhythm. So let me do this again real quick because, you know, the ooh ah moment is when you get to see the color. So they got to be orange, right? Because, huh? It's not OSU orange. It's carrot orange. Carrot orange. Let me try this time. I'll sand the nose now before I make the little. So so let me say this. Okay, you can spend a couple $100 and get started, right? You can also spend. I just bought that lathe. My wife's going to kill me for telling you this, but it was $10,000. Okay, and my uncle asked me that one time, right? So this was my first big lathe. This one. And it's made out of, it's in Wisconsin. It's the only American-made lathe that's out there. So it's a little bit more expensive than buying a Chinese one, but it's a great lathe. And there's lots of reasons. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you buy it. Certainly not if you haven't started. As a matter of fact, if you want to try to get started in this, come here. It's free. I've got all the equipment. You can decide if it's something you want to do. And if you decide you want to do it, then you're probably going to invest probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,500 to get started. A little miniature lathe is, $800, and you're going to need some tools. The wood's generally free if you'll go collect it. I have a chainsaw. You might need a bandsaw, but there's ways around all of that. It's a great question, though. I get that a lot. So anyway, when my uncle asked me this a couple of years ago, would have been several now, probably 10, I looked around my shop and I thought to myself, well, I probably have $14,000 invested in this hobby. And you think, well, that's an enormous amount of money until you ask yourself, how much does a bass boat cost? How much does
why you gotta go to bass boat?
how much does a truck cost to pull it? How much does all of that stuff, right? The reality is, and then the other thing is that my hobby has me at home. And I'm, okay, I'm not. Think about your if you're married, right? If your hobby takes you away from your house all the time, and then after you're done doing whatever it is you do with your hobby, golf, whatever, you decide, well, I'm going to go drinking, and then we're going to have a couple of beers and hang out with my buddies, and what was a 4-hour thing turns into a 6 or an 8 or a 10-hour thing when you're not at home. One of the things my wife knows about my hobby is if I'm doing it, she has to walk over from the house, but she knows where I am. And in my opinion, this is one of the better hobbies that you can have. I mean, there's a lot of other hobbies where you do it at home too, but I just think that having a hobby that you can this one certainly doesn't cause problems in marriages as a general rule, except for when you spend too much money on it. But anyway, so at this point, obviously, I have a lot more than $14,000. I mean, I had to buy this farm and whatnot. But anyway, there's an idea of a nose. From there, Joan will paint. She'll pick a face. I'll nick this off and that off on the saw, sand it up a little bit. She'll pick where she's going to put the face, and then I'll drill a hole between the eyes and glue that in there. And then I drill holes in the sides, and all these are, I used to weld, well, first off, I started by going out and buying sticks, okay, or not buying, but finding sticks. And it's really hard to find a bunch of little sticks. Like, you get 75 snowmen you're making, that's 150 little sticks that look exactly like these. So that didn't work. And so then I started brazing up wire, to get in there, and that took forever. Concrete reinforcing looks an awful lot like this, and you can usually find some of it that's rusty that's out there. And I just use a bolt cutters and I just go cut them out of fencing. And
I have some
then
of that in my backyard with Brad. He wants some.
I do. I'm,
Take nip on that.
I'm actually out, and if it's rusty, all the better,
Very
right?
rusty.
So that's pretty much it on the Snowman.
I'll go on.
Oh, I do.
But